If you ever get kidnapped, just do what our main character today does, break their necks one by one. Let's rewind 30 minutes. A bear was inviting everyone to a performance by the famous Straw Circus. While shouting out the invitation, a boy carrying an oversized suitcase bumped into the bear. The bear handed him a flyer. Upon seeing it was a circus, the boy expressed a desire to go along. The bear assumed the boy was a runaway. Judging by his appearance, he didn't seem to be abused, so there must be some reason behind it. To avoid trouble, the bear decided not to get involved in other people's business. Seeing the bear not respond, the boy left sadly. Suddenly, the bear started convulsing. Apparently, he only felt better if he could make people laugh. The bear frantically danced and spun around hoping to make someone laugh. Just when he seemed close to death, the boy from earlier laughed heartily, saving his life. Suddenly, the boy was surrounded by 3 men in suits. It was obvious they were kidnappers, so the bear rushed in to save him. Strangely, even when their necks, arms, or legs were broken, they could heal instantly as if nothing happened. Realizing something was wrong, the bear grabbed the boy and ran. The two fled to a train station to escape. Before they could catch their breath, the man inside the bear suit had another seizure. He forced the boy to laugh. But in such a situation, no one could laugh. Eventually, the boy did laugh and saved him again. The man introduced himself as Kato, and the boy as Sega, a 5th grader. The suited man had been chasing Sega ever since his father died. His father was the president of a giant conglomerate specializing in it and automobiles. It's that classic plot when a big company president dies, the heir becomes the target of villains. Kato had read a lot about this kind of stuff online. Sega explained that his father died in a highway accident. Something resembling a doll got caught in his tire. That doll reminded Sega of something his late grandfather once said. All the men in the Sega family had a room full of dolls like that. For some reason, every man in the family had a passion for those dolls. They had built-in mechanisms that made them move as if they were alive. He called them Karakuri dolls. It seemed the grandfather had foreseen danger befalling his grandson. He instructed that if Sega's father died before Sega became an adult, he should take that suitcase and run. Shirogane would protect him. Even Sega didn't know who that was, but his grandfather said that person would always be with the circus closest to him. Kato realized that was why the boy wanted to go with him. Since he'd already helped, he figured he'd go all the way. Kato promised to take Sega to the circus to meet Shirogane. Just then, the suited man found the two. Because he'd promised to help Sega, Kato decided to fight the man using the triple coin technique he just learned. However, unlike last time, the man slammed Kato to the ground. Suddenly, the train made an emergency stop. Another suited man was standing in the way. The train collided with him, derailed, and went flying. Just before they were about to reunite with his father, Sega apologized for dragging Kato into this mess. Maybe it really would have been better if he had just died alone. Kato reassured the boy, saying there was no need to apologize. When in trouble, ask for help. If no one helps, then fight on your own. And if that still doesn't work, come find him, your big bro. After saying that, Kato flung the suited man out of the train car, and Sega plunged straight into the circus. Sega stepped out and called for Shirogane. Before anyone appeared, another suited man showed up and was about to kill him. But just in time, a girl descended from above. Using the suitcase Sega brought, she summoned an incredibly cool puppet. Shiro used one move to obliterate the suited man. Shiro was overjoyed that the young master was safe. The puppet was named Arlequin. Sega's grandfather had hired Shiro when he stopped in France. She was the daughter of Sega's nanny. Both mother and daughter owed his grandfather a great debt. Just then, Kato, who survived, arrived looking for Sega. Shiro immediately shifted into battle mode and fought Kato. A dispute broke out between them, leading to a fight. When Sega tried to stop them, he got hit. Panicking, Shiro recalled Arlequin and carried the young master away, saying Kato's job was done and that she would protect him from now on. Kato didn't want more trouble anyway. He still had to deal with his ridiculous condition. If he didn't make people laugh, he would die. After the crash, Kato helped the injured. He reflected, if Sega was constantly being hunted and chaos like this kept happening, how would he ever make anyone laugh again? Meanwhile, Shiro was trying to flag down a car to take Sega to the hospital, but no one stopped. Kato arrived and told her to follow him. He knew an excellent doctor. With no other choice, Shiro agreed. Luckily, Seiga's injuries weren't life-threatening, so the two could rest easy. The doctor then left to prepare some medicine, leaving Shiro and Kato to take care of Seiga. Shiro asked what Kato's goal was. He replied bluntly, it was for himself since Seiga was easy to make laugh. Kato would stick with him. Suddenly, a puppet appeared outside. Shiro summoned Harlequin, and Kato got into battle stance. Then the puppet's controller showed up. It was a Shiba. He had been hired to eliminate Seiga. Ashiba was confident in his puppet, boasting of its superior strength and durability. Shiro told Kato to step aside so she could fight one-on-one. What seemed like it would be a fierce battle turned out to be one-sided. Harlequin blocked attacks with a single hand, and Ashiba's puppet couldn't even escape its grip. According to Seiga's grandfather, the Seiga family's puppets were crafted with extreme precision and uniqueness, each worth billions of yen. Ashiba, once arrogant, was now pale with fear but still laughed, saying his men had already captured Seiga. However, Kato was still there. His three-coin technique might not work on puppets, but it worked perfectly on gangsters. He thrashed them like punching bags. Seeing the tide had turned, Ashiba retreated. At that moment, Shiro realized she couldn't protect the young master alone. Seiga apologized again for troubling Kato, but Kato told him to laugh because he was having another seizure and about to die. The doctor diagnosed Kato with a physiological dysfunction caused by an overactive parasympathetic nervous system triggered by sensing others in that state. It was a hereditary condition from his grandfather, called Zonapha syndrome. In human biology, the sympathetic nervous system activates stress responses, while the parasympathetic governs relaxation. Zonapha causes the body to react violently when it doesn't sense others being relaxed, meaning, if Kato can't feel people around him in a relaxed state, he suffers seizures. Symptoms include intense tracheal contractions and difficulty breathing. As soon as the doctor finished explaining, Kato had another attack. He tried making the three laugh but failed, so he ran outside in desperation. Driven by pain, he caused a scene at a convenience store, scaring people instead of amusing them. Shiro stepped in, pretending to perform a skit to attract attention. With Seiga joining in, the crowd laughed, and Kato was saved once again. But he refused to thank someone as unpleasant as Shiro. Afterward, Seiga and Shiro temporarily stayed at Kato's place. Shiro cooked, while Kato needed to find out who wanted Seiga dead. The boy thought hard but couldn't figure it out. He had only been part of the Seiga household for 3 years and hadn't even met all the relatives. In truth, his mother had been his father's mistress, not the legal wife. Seiga lived with his mother when he was little. After her death, a lawyer came and took him away. That was the first time he met his father, and then he was accepted into the Seiga family. Seiga asked Kato about the cost of building a proper grave. He wanted one for his mother. Hearing that, Kato didn't know how to respond. During dinner, Kato made Seiga eat a lot so he could grow stronger. For now, he had learned a bit about Seiga, but this foreign girl who kept claiming to be Shirogane still raised suspicions. She clung to Seiga as soon as they met, who knew what her real intentions were. But Kato admitted, if she dropped the hostility toward him, she was actually pretty cute. After the meal, Seiga went to bathe. Remembering that the boy was still hurt, Kato thought of helping him. But when he entered, he found Shiro already there, making him flee in panic. He went outside to train and clear his head. It turned out Kato had trained in martial arts in mainland China. It wasn't just some online self-taught thing. Watching Kato practice, Seiga wished he could be strong like that too. He was always weak, always running, always crying. Kato encouraged him, saying he used to be even weaker than Seiga. Thanks to his training, Kato became who he was now. But Seiga was still full of insecurity, so Kato brought out an old photo album. It showed him as a timid, dorky kid who was scared of everything and always came last in sports. Seeing that made Seiga feel a bit better. Shiro came to take the young master to bed. Since she had no change of clothes, she borrowed one of Kato's shirts. He was flustered, but she didn't mind. Back in the circus, people used to sneak glances at her all the time. Before bed, Kato promised to help Seiga become stronger. Late that night, Shiro was still awake, standing guard. Seiga went to the bathroom without her for once, but then a puppet appeared and kidnapped him. Shiro, in a hurry, hadn't brought Harlequin and was knocked to the ground. Kato tried to help but was also attacked. The enemies escaped with Seiga. The two gave chase and soon ran into Ashiba. This time, he wasn't the one behind it. The attackers were his rivals. Ashiba explained that Sega's kidnapping stemmed from him inheriting the entire Sega conglomerate's fortune. Many people weren't happy about it. Ashiba himself had only been hired to kill Sega, while the ones now involved were hired to kidnap him. Different clients, different purposes. Ashiba knew exactly who they were part of the same puppeteer clan as him, which had long since split into two warring factions. He hinted that the client behind the kidnapping wanted to adopt Sega, and that the boy was likely being taken to the Sega family's mansion in Karuizawa. Ashiba said he might drop by for fun, and that the other two were free to follow. Before leaving, he gave them some information. That mansion was a Karakuri estate filled with grotesque puppets built by the previous Sega patriarch. It was guarded by the most skilled puppeteers of the clan. Kato, after listening to all this, was furious. To harm a child over money, how disgusting. Though to be fair, hundreds of trillions of yen wasn't exactly pocket change. Still, Kato swore to rescue Sega. The next day, Kato and Shiro set out. Meanwhile, Sega was taken to Zenji, his father's younger brother, who claimed to be honoring his promise to care for Sega after his father's death. Though suspicious, Sega couldn't act. Something about Zenji was deeply unsettling. Outside the estate, the kidnappers had surrounded the area in a defensive formation. Ashiba's assassin group was also lying in wait in the forest, planning an attack. Suddenly, the roar of a motorbike shattered the quiet. It was Kato and Shiro. Kato rammed the gates, sending the fake guards fleeing. He stayed behind to draw attention, while Shiro slipped inside to rescue Sega. Kato barehandedly knocked out anyone who dared come near, slicing through the enemy despite their knives. Ashiba's assassins also joined the fray. Shiro encountered her first opponent, a woman who had turned the gate into a meat-grinding machine, shredding anyone who approached. Harlequin, of course, was too powerful. One sweep destroyed the mechanism. The green-haired woman then entered the fight directly. Inside the mansion, Zenji revealed his true nature and tried to convince Sega to let him adopt him. Sega knew he had to escape. When he asked to use the bathroom, Zenji offered to hold his thing for him. Terrified, Sega fled. Outside, the green-haired woman Takami controlled a puppet that scattered bombs, but Harlequin caught and returned every last one. It was said that puppeteers had to train from childhood, but for Shiro, puppet handling was something she was born touching and learning. Meanwhile, Kato confronted Ashiba again, demanding to know how someone who controlled giant puppets could so easily disregard human life. Ashiba said puppeteers like him now belonged to the Kuroga clan. Since the Heian era, their clan had performed puppet rituals to honor the gods. As for Sega, he was hiding inside a cupboard, where he stumbled across his father's diary. Inside were entries about him. Sega discovered he was merely bait. His father believed puppets and their masters were unnecessary and intended to use Sega as the trigger to wipe out the entire Kuroga. Sega couldn't believe it. Just then, Zenji found him. Ironically, the Sega clan played a role in turning the once divine puppeteer clan into assassins. The Kuroga's task was to control the puppets, the Segas to build them. And the Sega clan had paid the Kuroga clan a huge sum for their services, so the Kuroga simply carried out their tasks. After saying that, Ashiba's group split off and went their own way, while Kato and Shiro headed straight for the mansion. Suddenly, a trap activated and Shiro fell. Kato quickly caught her, but it triggered a seizure. Shiro told him to let go, but he said no. She wasn't a puppet, so she had to value her life. Besides, if anything happened to her, Sega would be sad. With that, Kato jumped down together with her. Meanwhile, Sega was being tortured to force him to accept being adopted, but he firmly refused, which only made Zenji beat him more savagely. Then Zenji received a report that Kato and Shiro had died. This shocked Sega, but he still didn't give in. He kept resisting. So, Zenji decided to take him to see their corpses. As for Kato, Shiro was safe because he had used his back to absorb the impact of the fall. Now, with his seizures acting up, things didn't look good. Shiro wanted to help, but whatever she did, she couldn't smile because it had been a long time since she last smiled. Kato didn't want to die either. He had to rescue Sega. Then he started telling jokes. Somehow, in the middle of it, Kato said he'd marry Shiro. Though she didn't smile, his seizures stopped, and his heart was pounding wildly. Sega, watching from a distance, was overjoyed to see they were still alive. He quickly began planning his escape. Meanwhile, Kato and Shiro pressed on. Kato told her to forget what he said earlier. Shiro didn't mind. She never considered herself human. Since the moment she became self-aware as a child, she'd been trained to control puppets. Her trainer was strict. Shiro had to learn to cast aside pain, emotion, and even her own identity. She would become a puppet herself. Since then, she had lived under the name Shirogane, with a single mission. Someone had created autonomous puppets called automata, and she was to use Harlequin to destroy them. A puppet didn't need emotions. But Kato said that was nonsense. She was human, not a puppet. When she was with Seiga, she'd shown many emotions. That was proof. Meanwhile, Seiga had climbed to the rooftop, but it was too high to jump. He was terrified, but he couldn't go back. He knew he needed to change, to grow stronger. He couldn't keep relying on Shiro and Kato. With that resolve, he jumped. That decision felt like he had cast away his former weak self. He fell into the forest and landed right on someone who was attacking Ashiba. Seiga stood up and looked the man in the eye. He needed him. Seiga made an offer he'd hire Ashiba to join his side. Ashiba saw in Seiga's eyes a desperate will to live unbelievable for a 10-year-old. Though surprised by the boy's determination, Ashiba had a principle. He never betrayed a client. But Seiga then showed them the truth through his father's journal. The Kuroga were being used to create the ultimate puppet. Once they had served their purpose, the Seiga clan planned to wipe them out. Ashiba asked how much Seiga could pay. Then he snatched the puppet from his opponent and led Seiga to confront Zenji. But Zenji wasn't fazed. He revealed that he had captured Kato and Shiro as hostages. Naturally, a child wouldn't understand the situation fully. All Seiga wanted was to protect the people he cared about. Zenji said that if Seiga accepted him as a father, he'd let them go. Under relentless pressure, Seiga couldn't think clearly and was about to give in. But Ashiba stopped him. He didn't believe Zenji would release them that easily. Seiga questioned Zenji again. The answer was, yes, he'd let them go by throwing them off the mountain into the sea. Enraged, Seiga recalled Kato's technique and copied it. He took Zenji down with a clean takedown, then added a combo that broke his arm and leg. But there was no time to flee. The bombs Ashiba's men had planted were about to explode. Seiga quickly came up with an idea. Meanwhile, Kato and Shiro were trapped in a cage. This triggered panic in Shiro when she was little. She had also been locked in a dark place. Kato held her to comfort her. His smile calmed her a little. That smile reminded her of someone else, Seiga's grandfather. Long ago, he had told her that one day she'd find happiness, as long as she protected Seiga. If she did, then she would no longer be a puppet. And then Seiga told Ashiba to leap across to the temple over there. Ashiba wasn't sure he could do it, but Seiga insisted he could. He had analyzed the puppet, and the chances of success were high. Hearing that, Ashiba made the jump, but he slipped. Refusing to give up, Seiga took over control and successfully reached Kato and Shiro. The three were overjoyed to be reunited. Ashiba, however, had been badly injured and passed out. Just then, the remaining puppet masters appeared. One of them tried to kill Seiga, but the puppet's knife shattered on contact with Kato's muscles. He was furious upon seeing Seiga's body covered in injuries. Seiga used Kai to destroy the cage, then stepped out to fight. Without their puppets, these guys were nothing. Kato took them all out with ease. But once they started using puppets, even he was overwhelmed. Things got harder when Shiro was attacked and couldn't unleash Harlequin's full power. But they still had Seiga. He was no longer weak. Seiga borrowed Harlequin to fight. Shockingly, though most people took years or even a lifetime to master a puppet, Seiga could use it just by watching. He even copied Shiro's techniques. As someone once said, his breakthrough instinct, instant judgment, and adaptability were exceptional. Precisely because he had no strength, his natural talent had grown strong. Right after defeating the enemy, the bomb detonated and destroyed the mansion. Kato shielded Seiga, Harlequin protected Shiro, and Ashiba woke up just in time to rescue the group. His men had tied ropes from the opposite side. Kato still didn't trust Ashiba, but Ashiba said Seiga had hired him for a high price, so not to worry. Just to be sure, Kato paid an extra 10 yen as a bonus fee. Ashiba went first, then Shiro. But the tower began to collapse, and Seiga fell. Kato went to save the boy since Shiro was injured. He pushed her away and descended to find Seiga. He shielded Seiga from the falling debris. Perhaps it was the last time they could speak. Kato told Seiga to smile. If he ever felt lost, he should listen to his heart and decide what to do. That would be the moment to smile, not to cry. Another bomb exploded. Flames engulfed the night. By sunrise, everything was in ruins. Seiga survived, but Kato had only one arm left, tightly holding him. 2 months after Kato's death, Seiga returned to a normal life. Shiro left the circus and became his maid. Though happy to have her by his side, Shiro was overprotective. Eventually, Seiga was able to return to school. Shiro also enrolled in school nearby to stay close and protect him. She was in high school, just next to Seiga's. They usually went to school together. Before saying goodbye, Shiro reminded him that if anyone bullied him, he should come to her. Seiga said he'd be fine. But the moment he entered school, his shoes were already stolen, starting with this gorilla-faced kid. After all he'd been through, Seiga had matured and didn't bother with the petty stuff. But the kid wasn't done yet. He doodled on Seiga's desk and scattered pins on his chair. Still, Seiga responded with a smile, enduring every mischief just as Kato had taught him, to smile in the face of hardship. Outside, Shiro witnessed everything and was visibly annoyed. Eventually, the gorilla gang stopped playing games and started bullying him directly. The class president tried to intervene, but the gorilla still punched Seiga, and that was his mistake. The punch revealed the scar on Seiga's forehead. Realizing he couldn't hide it anymore, Seiga took off his shirt and showed them why he hadn't returned to school for so long. His body was covered in wounds. He had endured unimaginable pain, so their petty bullying meant nothing to him. He said he smiled simply because he wanted to carry on the will of that person, the one who braved hardship to protect him. Meanwhile, Shiro got scolded for skipping class on her first day. Somewhere that looked like a garbage dump, an old man was trying to negotiate a rent extension with his landlord. The landlord advised him to shut down that ridiculous circus. It was outdated anyway. The old man was so furious, he looked like he was about to smash the table right into the landlord. During P class, Seiga sat with a girl classmate who asked him to tell her about the person who had saved him. Actually, there were 2 people. One had passed away, and the other was his older sister, Shirogane. She used to work in a circus and was good at everything from cooking to cleaning. She was also incredibly graceful whenever she performed on stage. The girl remarked that Shiro sounded perfect. But Seiga didn't think so. No matter how much people praised or admired her, Shiro never smiled. She always responded with a sorrowful smile. Back when they were in the hospital, she told Seiga that just before Kato went to save him, he had another attack, but at that moment, Shiro couldn't bring herself to smile. That's why, whenever she thinks of Kato, she can't smile. And yet, they could never forget him. The girl asked if Shiro planned to return to any circus. She wanted to see her perform at least once and thought it might help Shiro feel happier. So Seiga dragged her to that circus that looked like a garbage dump. Though Shiro said she didn't need to, Seiga insisted on inviting her to join. Just then, the man who owed rent appeared. He had heard rumors that Shiro wanted to join the circus again. He was Shinobu, the circus troupe leader. His 2 goons immediately stepped out when they saw a foreign girl and welcomed her. They even put on a talent show for Seiga, who enjoyed it and asked Shiro to perform something too. She then did a balancing act on a ladder that left all 4 of them speechless. Shiro said her duty was to protect her young master, but if Seiga wished for her to join, she would follow his will. The leader was overjoyed with Shiro's talent. Their circus would no longer be considered outdated. He introduced the 2 men as Nori and Hiro, and there was also a beast tamer named Miss Lyslot. Meanwhile, in a military hospital, the man thought to be dead Kato was actually saved. The person who saved him seemed to now need Kato's help. Upon waking, Kato learned he was in a hospital in Illinois, USA. It seemed he had lost his memory. His savior was a young aristocrat from France named Guy Christophe Rech, and the elderly lady with him was Lucille Verneuil. Kato truly wanted to know who he was, but Guy told him to take it slow. His memories would return in time. Kato's loud arguing frightened a young boy outside, who ran away. When Kato chased after him, he found many other children. Seeing how scared they were, Kato instinctively tried to cheer them up, but he ended up doing martial arts moves in front of them. The kids found it cool and gathered around him. Suddenly, the boy from earlier had a seizure. Seeing that triggered something in Kato's memory, and he collapsed. A doctor advised him not to exert himself so soon after waking. From what they knew, Kato had been caught in the mansion explosion in Japan and had very slim chances of survival. He was brought to this Art State hospital for treatment. Kato asked if the boy also had Zonapha syndrome like he did. Guy replied that around 20 children with Zonapha were being cared for at this facility. It was the world's largest research and treatment center for the syndrome. Apparently, the doctors here didn't think well of Guy and Lucille. They blamed Guy for delaying the effort to contain the disease, letting it spread further. Kato asked why Guy had saved him, and Guy replied that he would explain when the time came. And so Kato began living in the hospital. His days were spent eating, sleeping, and playing with the children. He gradually got used to his new arm and grew close to the kids. One night, while going to the bathroom, Kato saw the doctors all taking drugs. He ran to find another doctor, but instead stumbled upon a horrifying scene: Guy and Lucille interrogating a child like a criminal. Though they claimed it was for treatment, Kato couldn't take it. He smashed the glass and punched Guy in the face. However, Guy didn't seem to feel any pain, and Kato's wounds from the glass miraculously healed. The doctors then came and took the child away. A nurse asked Kato after living here for a month, hadn't he noticed that none of the children ever had seizures? It wasn't because they were cured. The Zonapha disease was still a mystery. The only known way to help the children was to make them laugh. To do that, all the staff forced themselves to smile. They needed to relax the sympathetic nervous system using drugs. But because research was making no progress, the doctors were increasingly anxious, and yet they weren't allowed to show any sign of sorrow. Guy also told Kato that this hospital was no different from hell. A doctor later took Kato to see the intensive care unit, where many children were suffering in agony. The doctor explained that the Zonapha syndrome had 3 stages. The first stage involved difficulty breathing and full body pain. The second stage brought complications due to a weakened immune system. Most children couldn't survive past these first 2 stages. But true release only came with death. The most terrifying part was stage 3. The children could no longer die. The doctor brought Kato down to a basement where countless children were lying in rows. At this stage, their body temperatures dropped and their muscles became rigid. They also couldn't sleep. Now Kato understood why this place was called hell. Kato asked Guy what he had done to his body. It had only been 2 months, yet he had completely recovered. Guy revealed that he used aqua vitae to save Kato. It was a miraculous elixir that could cure any illness, even Zonapha syndrome, and it was the only known cure. But to save Kato, they had used up all they had. Aqua vitae could only be refined by ancient alchemists, and saving Kato had a purpose. Guy wanted to ask Kato to help him, to destroy the automata. While Zonapha syndrome remained a mystery, Guy knew its origin. It was spread by the automata, and the group commanding them was the Midnight Circus. Guy's mission was to destroy them, and he needed Kato to become a Shirogane. Upon hearing that name, Kato remembered someone, but before he could recall more, Lucille entered to announce they had arrived. Outside, a group of people in white clothes attacked the hospital, draining blood from the guards. Kato and the doctors quickly evacuated the children while Guy stepped forward to confront the attackers. He summoned a puppet named Olympia and began to dance, destroying each enemy that approached. Lucille explained that these enemies were spreading the disease, and the Shirogane's mission was to eliminate them. At that moment, a child in Kato's arms had a seizure. He tried to force a smile, but couldn't, and the little girl died in his arms. Kato asked why Guy didn't save the children. Lucille replied that using the last drops of aqua vitae on these children wouldn't solve the bigger problem. Instead, they were placing their hopes in Kato. If he became a Shirogane and defeated the automata, they could save many more. Lucille handed Kato a mask worn by former alchemists who had to endure unbearable pain and used it to hide their sorrow. Before she could finish, Kato stormed out in a rage, destroying anything that had harmed the children. He was like a wild beast roaring with fury. The automata leader then made his move, throwing his doll at Kato, which bit and tore at him. Without giving Kato time to recover, the doll returned to its master, who then hurled a giant automaton at him. In that critical moment, Guy told Kato to press a button on his mechanical arm. Kato immediately countered and pinned the enemy to the ground. He declared that if the automata were demons to the children, then he would be a demon to them. When the puppet tried to save its master, Kato shattered it with one strike. The other enemy tried to flee, but Kato took off his head on the spot. Kato poured all his rage and the pain the children had endured into his attacks. Afterward, he agreed to follow Guy and become a Shirogane. He accepted the ancestral mask and told the doctors he would protect everyone here. He would protect the children, even if it meant becoming a demon. Meanwhile, on Seiga's side, since it was summer vacation, he and Shiro were traveling with Shinobu's circus troupe. Because they had no money to run the circus, they had to work part-time to earn income. The ringmaster, Hiro, and Nori did heavy labor, while Shiro performed at a zoo to make some extra cash. After one of her performances, a girl suddenly showed up and challenged Shiro. But Shiro ignored her, which angered the girl into throwing a knife at her. Shiro deflected it with just 2 juggling balls. Fascinated by Shiro, the girl immediately declared herself her sister-in-arms. The two sat and talked, and the girl revealed she was born into a circus family in America. She once aspired to be a knife thrower like her father, but couldn't do it. Her younger brother had Zonapha syndrome, and the family spent all their money trying to treat him. She had to dive into work to help support them. In the end, her little brother passed away at 15. Hearing this, Shiro also recalled Kato, and she shared her story about him. Feeling a sense of connection, the two got to know each other. Her name was Vilma. That night, when Shiro returned to the circus troupe, she told Seiga about it. He was happy that Shiro was finally opening up to someone. Shiro felt the same. Before, she only saw others as either friend or foe, but after meeting Seiga, she realized that talking to others wasn't so bad after all. After that, Shiro went to return the props she borrowed from the zoo. While Seiga was alone, Vilma targeted him. Even when he was about to die, he still managed to smile. Fortunately, Shiro had returned after hearing a noise. She deployed Arlequin to attack, but Vilma was far too fast. More than just fast, she was highly skilled. She continuously threw knives at Shiro, and in no time, Shiro's body was like a porcupine. Not wanting her to get hurt anymore, Seiga stood in front of Shiro to shield her. At that moment, Vilma remembered her deceased younger brother. Seeing her opponent show an opening, Shiro went all out and had Arlequin launch a full assault. It seemed that all Shirogane possessed special physical traits. Shiro pulled the knives out of her body, and her wounds healed instantly. But even if she could regenerate, taking continuous damage was still too much. She couldn't keep up. Seiga begged her not to fight so recklessly anymore. She had promised to protect him and to return to being a normal person. Their conversation brought Vilma back to the image of her dying brother, who, even knowing he was going to die, still smiled and asked her to live on for his sake. In the end, Vilma couldn't bring herself to kill Seiga and collapsed. Shiro took the opportunity to kill her, but Seiga stopped her, and she remembered Kato's words to value life. Shiro decided to stop. Afterward, Seiga wanted to take Vilma back to the circus to treat her. He wanted to become strong like Kato so he could protect everyone. Hearing that, Shiro told him to drink her blood. It would protect him from illness and injury. When Vilma woke up, Shiro was watching over her. Shiro told her that the one who saved her was the very boy she tried to kill. If she knew what was good for her, she should leave and never show her face again. The two, who were once confidants, had a short talk. Shiro used to be cold and only followed orders, but after meeting Seiga and the others, she learned many things. Now, she wanted to change. Vilma thought for a moment and then came up with a new way to earn money instead of hunting. The next day, Vilma joined the circus troupe. With her knife-throwing skills, there was no doubt she'd be a standout. After a long period of working and saving, the troupe was finally able to organize a proper performance. On the day of the grand opening, Seiga chatted with lies. Though she claimed to be a beast tamer, she only worked with dogs and cats. Her family used to tame wild beasts in an old circus. She was supposed to follow in their footsteps, but a tragic accident occurred. Her sister was killed by a tiger. Since then, she stopped training wild animals. Still, she remained part of the circus, so Seiga wanted to see her perform. Everyone was bustling about, preparing for the big day. Vilma couldn't believe she had rejoined a circus. It felt like meeting a long-lost lover. She asked Shiro if she had ever fallen for anyone. Shiro had never opened her heart to anyone, but there was one person who had changed her deeply. The more she thought about him, the more her tears fell. Vilma told her she was totally hung up on that guy. Up in the sky, Kato's team was heading to China to capture automata. At that moment, several enemies began morphing into automata. They attacked Kato's group, revealing that their goal was to make the plane crash. Kato, acting too hastily, punched one of them so hard it flew out of the plane, tearing a hole in the fuselage and accelerating the crash. The automata then destroyed everything around them to turn the place into a fighting arena. They wanted to duel Kato hand to hand, having heard he could fight barehanded. They even took children hostage every time they were hit. They would break one of the children's fingers. Guy asked why they didn't pick him instead, since his fingers controlled Olympia. So the automata changed targets to Guy. In the first match, Kato easily crushed one of them with a punch, but the automaton holding Guy snapped one of his fingers in retaliation. Whether Kato got hit or landed a hit, Guy's fingers would still be broken. Guy told him not to worry and urged him to finish them off quickly. Meanwhile, Lucy was still protecting the passengers. She couldn't act recklessly, as the enemies might have already taken over the cockpit. She needed to reclaim it. Back on Kato's end, Guy had already had 7 of his fingers broken. After a while, Kato finished off the rest, leaving only the one holding Guy. Kato delivered a powerful punch to his face just as Lucy neutralized the automaton piloting the plane and disarmed the bomb attached to him. As for Kato, the last automaton, badly wounded, tried to suck blood to regenerate, but Kato used the chain in his arm to yank him back with a "get over here" move. Guy then had Plimpier wrap herself around the bomb. Luckily, he survived. Though Kato deeply disliked Guy, he did worry about him a little. Outside the plane, a swarm of insect-type automata were attacking the engines. From the cockpit, Lucy radioed that both Kato and Guy needed to stop them. Guy had put a wedding dress on Plimpia. It was high-tech gear designed to help her dance in midair. However, Guy was exhausted and had only 3 fingers left to control Plimpia. Things were critical, as the second engine had already been destroyed. Even in such a dire situation, Guy still managed to joke around. Before heading out, he told Kato that if anything happened to him, Kato should take over the task of destroying the Midnight Circus. Then, Guy and Plimpia danced through the air, taking down the insect-type enemies one by one. But their numbers were overwhelming, and they eventually swarmed and pinned Guy and Plimpia. He taunted one automaton to kill him, but just as it was about to slash him, he used Plimpia to restrain and destroy it. However, the automaton launched itself straight into the plane's engine. Guy pushed it away, and the explosion took him with it. There was no time for mourning. Kato still had to deal with the swarm near the left wing. Lucy began emergency landing procedures. Surprisingly, the plane landed right next to the circus grounds, where Sega was performing. Shiro rushed out to check on the crash, her heart pounding. When she thought she saw Kato, she dashed forward but couldn't find him anywhere. Kato had gone into the cockpit to find Lucy, but she was already subdued. He dragged the automaton out to fight. The automaton went berserk, craving blood, and targeted Sega. Shiro shielded him. Kato quickly destroyed the automaton and pulled both of them away. Amidst the smoke and dust, they couldn't clearly see Kato's face. Since he still didn't remember them, he left to look for Lucy. Once they realized it was him, Shiro and Sega split up to search, but he was already gone. They found Guy instead, and to their shock, he turned out to be Shiro's teacher. She immediately began treating his injuries. That night, Sega thought about Kato. When Shiro joined him, he asked how she met Guy. She told him it was during her travels with her teacher. Eventually, she was taken to a place in France called Quinbarin, where she was told she had to become a puppet controller. After harsh training, she lost her emotions and became a true puppet herself. Through it all, Guy stayed by her side. Sega had always thought Kato was the first to show Shiro kindness, and the image of Kato during the plane crash haunted his thoughts. In truth, Shiro's heart had pounded wildly when she thought it was Kato. Her heart could beat this strongly because of him. He was the one who brought warmth into her cold life. That night, Sega had a nightmare about Kato's sacrifice. He knew he had to become stronger not just for himself, but to live up to what Kato had given him. At dawn, he resolved to leave and find out why his father had left the entire inheritance to him. Meanwhile, Kato and Lucy had arrived at a mountain range in China. The girl they met there was Mingxia, daughter of Master Feng, the martial arts teacher who had trained Kato. When Kato visited the dojo in search of leads on the Midnight Circus, he learned that Master Feng had contracted the Zonifa syndrome and had left home in search of the Fountain of Immortality. Lucy said that if they could find him, they might be able to uncover the circus's location. Mingxia decided to join them. Master Feng's homeland belonged to the Bai clan. Mentioning this triggered a few memories in Kato visions that had been recurring. According to Lucy, the aqua vitae Kato had absorbed was the final, most concentrated drop, which meant these memories could belong to a predecessor. Eventually, Kato found Master Feng along with a white dog. He explained everything and the reason he had come. Master Feng replied that if what Kato said was true, then there was something important he needed to know. The master told him that 200 years ago, there were two brothers in the Bai clan who were puppet artisans, the elder named Bai Yin and the younger named Bai Jin. These were the memories of the man whose soul resided within Kato. The two brothers, seeking the truth within real alchemy, set off on a journey. After 8 years, they finally arrived at the birthplace of alchemy, Prague, the city of 100 spires. There, they became apprentices to an elderly alchemist. One day, while out shopping for medicinal herbs, the Bai brothers accidentally ran into a white-haired girl named Francine. Both brothers instantly fell in love with her, yet they continued to study diligently and refine their alchemical skills, with the goal of using alchemy to breathe life into puppets to make them move like humans. From time to time, the two would drop by to buy apples from Francine. On one such day, during a festival, Francine invited them to join. Though Bai Yin initially didn't want to go, he gave in when Francine begged him. The three of them enjoyed the festivities together. Bai Yin noticed that Francine often didn't finish her food, but saved it instead. Later, they went to see a puppet show, only to find it cancelled because the puppeteer had been fired. Seeing this, Bai Yin and Bai Jin borrowed the venue to perform themselves. After all, they came from a puppet artisan family. The three of them had a wonderful evening. When Bai Jin got drunk, Bai Yin helped him back to his room, then walked Francine home. She lived in the slums, and it was there that Bai Yin learned why she always saved her food. She had several younger siblings to feed. After setting out the food, Francine told the children to eat because she was full, then quietly left. Bai Yin knew she was lying. She hadn't eaten all day while with him. He followed her and discovered the slave mark on her body. He also realized that despite starving, she still gave food to others. Bai Yin tried to take her back to reclaim her food, but when he saw the elderly villagers tearfully rejoicing over even a small piece of bread, he stopped. From one of the old folks, he learned that Francine had helped many of the poor in the area. She had escaped from human traffickers in France and come to Prague, doing any job she could find, even selling her hair to earn money to care for orphans and the elderly. The slave mark came from stealing a single egg, which she had taken to save a sick child who needed nutrition. In the end, she was caught and branded. By the time she was released, the child had already died. The villagers pleaded with Bai Yin to bring happiness to Francine. From that day on, his way of thinking changed. He told Bai Jin that if alchemy was a path to truth, then knowledge that helped no one but oneself was meaningless. He asked Bai Jin, would such a selfish path ever hold even the faintest glimmer of light? Bai Jin suspected something had happened between Francine and Bai Yin while he was drunk. He thought his brother had stolen Francine from him, knowing full well that Bai Jin loved her. But Bai Yin didn't answer. One day, Bai Yin found Francine at a church, praying not for herself, despite all her suffering, but for everyone to be free from illness. Deeply moved, Bai Yin made a decision. He proposed to her. He vowed to leave everything behind and work to support her and the children. Francine was touched and finally agreed. Bai Yin brought out a paper ring to place on her finger. The two kissed happily, unaware that Bai Jin had witnessed the entire scene, his heart boiling with fury. That very night, Bai Jin kidnapped Francine and vanished. Bai Yin immediately set out to find his wife. 9 years passed in a flash. One spring, Bai Yin finally found Bai Jin's whereabouts and held a knife to his throat. But he soon realized this was no longer the brother he once knew. Bai Jin said he had spent the past 9 years researching alchemy to cure Francine's illness. When Bai Yin learned she was sick, he asked where she was. He quickly rushed to the village where she was being held. The two were overjoyed to be reunited, but Francine was shackled, infected with a disease. Bai Yin told her not to worry. He had spent 9 years studying both Chinese and Western medicine and would cure her. However, he had only just begun his examination when the villagers dragged him away. Bai Yin promised he would create a cure and return to save her. That cure was the aqua vitae. Bai Yin returned to Bai Jin's mansion and began his research. After many sleepless days, Bai Yin finally completed the creation of that which every alchemist seeks, the philosopher's stone, the soft stone that produced the drop of life. But when he ran to find Francine, he saw that the place where she had been imprisoned was set ablaze by the villagers. Bai Yin desperately tried to break down the wall, but it was futile. In her final moments, Francine pleaded with him to use the drop of life to save someone who truly needed it. She cut her hair and gave it to Bai Yin, saying that Bai Jin would know what to do with it. She thanked him for bringing light into her life, and wished that, if there were a next life, she could meet him again. And just like that, Francine perished in the flames. That evening, Bai Yin returned in a daze. Bai Jin also arrived, having succeeded in creating the Philosopher's Stone as well, but it was too late. Bai Yin said nothing, merely handed Francine's hair to Bai Jin, and left. From that day on, the two brothers never saw each other again. Bai Yin left the village, while Bai Jin stayed behind. Then, 23 years later, Bai Jin created a puppet that looked exactly like Francine. But it was just a puppet, it had no emotions. Furious, Bai Jin created more puppets and released a disease upon the villagers who had harmed Francine. This disease forced those afflicted to make the puppet Francine laugh if they wanted to survive. Lucille was among those infected. The puppet's antics became increasingly deranged, they even began killing villagers, all to make Francine laugh. But true hell had yet to come. Those afflicted with the Zonapha syndrome could not die. They were trapped in a state of neither living nor dying. Then, one day, the first successor of true alchemy appeared. He saved Lucille, and she told him everything. He asked her if she would choose a life of fighting against the automata. Without hesitation, Lucille agreed. He then created a spring of aqua vitae from the Philosopher's Stone to save Lucille's village, but said only those who sought revenge against the automata were allowed to drink it. To defeat the automata, all they had to do was open the nearby chest. Lucille asked who he was. He said he was born in China, but preferred the name Shirogane, so she should call him that. As she left, the man approached the spring. He said he would disassemble himself here and monitor the villagers to ensure they did not abuse this power. Their mission was only to destroy the automata created by Bai Jin. When he removed his mask, it was revealed to be Bai Yin. He then threw himself into the spring, seeking Francine in the afterlife. The next day, only Lucille showed the will for vengeance. She drank the aqua vitae. In that instant, a flood of alchemical knowledge, foreign languages, the basic structure and weaknesses of automata, and methods to control them, an entire lifetime of Bai Yin's memories poured into her mind. Inside the chest was Arlequin, a powerful automaton. Lucille mastered control over it. More importantly, she inherited Bai Yin's will to destroy all the automata. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Puppets must return to being mere puppets. However, Kato was not influenced or bestowed with Bai Yin's knowledge. Lucille remarked that fools simply take longer. Ming Ha asked if Bai Yin was truly dead, and what became of Bai Jin. At that moment, Bai Jin's oldest automaton appeared, Pantalone. He asked permission to speak before sending them all to meet Bai Yin. He explained that Bai Jin had transferred all his resentment for the villagers onto Francine, convincing himself that she was just a puppet without feelings, and then destroyed her. After that, Bai Jin left the village. But the puppet Francine remained alive. With her own hands, she had distilled synthetic fluid within her body and passed it on to automata like them a willpower. They had one mission, to make Francine smile. To do so, the automata had to drink aqua vitae. Only then could they come to understand her thoughts and emotions. This was the mission of the Midnight Circus. Pantalone came here because Bai Yin had submerged the Philosopher's Stone into that spring. However, Master Feng would not allow him to drink it. He would put an end to the sins of his ancestors. He brought out the bomb he had prepared, then took his own life along with Pantalone. Master Feng's final words echoed Francine's as she burned in the flames. The long journey within Bai Yin's memories had come to an end that marked the beginning of the true finale. The finale of the Midnight Circus. At this moment in the United States, the Shirogane had gathered in one place after discovering the location of their most critical target, the Midnight Circus, the headquarters of the automata. Lucille encountered a Chinese Shirogane dog that had sniffed out a trail leading to the circus. The information was relayed to all Shirogane across the world. Soon after, a commander-in-chief appeared and gave a rousing speech to uplift everyone's spirits in preparation for the final battle. That night, Kato's group arrived ahead of the others at the circus. They chatted briefly before reinforcements other Shirogane joined them. The next morning, we see Ashiba again. He had received a sizable payment after his stint as an assassin, and was now traveling the world, though boredom was beginning to set in. At that moment, a Shirogane approached him and offered him a new world. Ashiba asked how much he would be paid. Back to Kato, his group's leader, Fatima, had also arrived. Everyone there had heard of Kato's reputation and were impressed. The commander-in-chief approached Lucille for a conversation. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the circus and destroy the central figure Francine, and everything would end. Rather than launching a full assault, they would fight one-on-one duels against the automata. A volunteer stepped in first to challenge them, but came back out with only his head remaining. The automaton introduced himself as daughter and told the Shirogane to send in a team. Kato was disturbed to see the Shirogane laughing, even after one of their own had just died. Lucille then selected the team: Fatima, Raken, Timba, Tor, and finally Kato. Mingxia also requested to go, and Lucille allowed her to join. Suddenly, one man couldn't wait and charged in on his own Zed. Though impulsive, he was still capable. Inside, they encountered Daughter, who summoned another automaton named Mary to fight the team. Mary had a carousel on his head. Zed charged first, but Mary transformed the carousel into a spinning weapon lined with blades and struck Zed, sending him flying. Zed, however, charged again and died a pointless death. Another Shirogane entered and met the same fate. Kato realized they were all insane. They didn't seem to feel pain at all. Timba prepared to step in, but Tor stopped him and suggested Kato fight instead, to see if he lived up to the hype. Using martial arts learned from Master Feng and enhanced by his Shirogane modified body, Kato effortlessly shattered the spinning blades, shocking everyone. But that was not enough to defeat Mary. Enraged, Mary invited Kato to face him head-on. When Kato approached, Mary attempted a surprise attack with another hidden blade, but Kato narrowly escaped. Fatima and Mingxia tried to join the fight, but two more automata blocked their way, proposing a 2-on-2 match. Suddenly, Lucille pinned Mingxia down and forced her to drink her blood. Inside the circus was a constant presence of Zonafa-inducing gas, so this would serve as a vaccine. Mingxia resisted, saying she didn't want to become a Shirogane. Fatima explained that she wouldn't stand a chance against automata without becoming one. That was the price to pay if Mingxia truly wanted revenge for her father. Mingxia eventually accepted and joined the battle alongside Fatima. At first, they were at a disadvantage. The two automata were extremely fast, and even Fatima's puppet couldn't keep up. But gradually, they adapted. Fatima had her puppet grab one automaton, and when the other rushed to help, Mingxia ambushed him from behind and broke his arm. Still, the enemies didn't relent. They tore off the girl's clothes, trying to render them unable to fight. Meanwhile, Mary had activated the spinning carousel again, preventing Kato from getting close. He extended a long arm to grab Kato, who struggled to dodge but was eventually caught. It looked like the end until Kato shouted, "Hell no," revealed he was standing on a blade, and used it to deliver the finishing blow. Back to the girls, they feigned embarrassment over their torn clothes to lower the automata's guard. The moment they dropped their vigilance, the girls struck together, securing victory in the second match for the Shirogane. Dada reappeared, congratulating them. He then led them to the next stage, where two doors stood before them. One would lead to Francine's location. Mingxia wanted to proceed, but her body was weakening due to her injuries and the fact that she had only consumed a small amount of Lucille's blood. She hadn't fully become a Shirogane yet. At this point, the commander-in-chief brought out a medical chamber. Fatima and Lucille would stay behind to tend to Mingxia, while Kato's group was divided into two teams to pass through the doors. Their objective was clear. Once they encountered Francine, they were to eliminate her. Kato's team entered a corridor made entirely of bones. As they advanced, they introduced themselves. The older man was Steve, the long-haired man was Tor, and the girl was Lena. Kato didn't want to talk to them. He despised those who did not value their own lives. Steve showed him a picture of his family, explaining he had come to protect them. Tor said he had a fiancé waiting at home, while Lena, like other Shirogane, claimed she didn't need human emotions. The four descended into a room where Daughter appeared, announcing that they had reached the correct chamber. Francine was just beyond the door. But only two people could pass through, meaning they would have to fight each other to the death. Suddenly, spikes emerged from the walls and the floor began to collapse. They had 18 minutes to resolve this. When Lena tried to attack Steve, Kato knocked her out. Tor summoned his puppet, ready for battle, but Kato told the two of them to go ahead. He would stay behind. When they questioned why, he simply said, "Helping others doesn't need a reason." His heart told him that the children suffering from Zonafa, or the families of those two, didn't deserve to cry anymore. Just then, a volley of spikes shot toward the three of them, but Kato blocked them all. His body was riddled with wounds, but he refused to give up. Seeing this, the other two decided to go ahead. As the platforms began to fall away, Lina regained consciousness, thinking she would die there. But Kato told her they would jump together and break through the wall. They succeeded, breaking through and reuniting with the commander-in-chief. Kato saw two Shirogane had died not by the commander's hands, but by someone behind him. Kato thought the commander must be heartless to be in charge. But the commander knew what Kato was thinking. He explained that he became a Shirogane because of his late wife. The commander then took out concealed surgical tools from his body and dismantled the enemies one by one. The Shirogane referred to him as faceless triple dissolution, first decomposition, then dissolution. He broke the door open to allow them to continue, but two automata appeared to block their path, citing a rule violation. Meanwhile, Mingxia had regained consciousness. When she heard that Kato's group had located Francine, she wanted to join them. Lucille agreed, but they would take a different route. Now, they only needed to wait for one more person. Ashiba, at that moment, was on a plane heading toward the Midnight Circus. Suddenly, they were attacked by a silver fog. Gyochi, the Shirogane traveling with Ashiba, explained that this was the source of the Zonafa syndrome. To prevent Ashiba from being infected, he had given him his own blood. Back to Kato, he stayed behind to hold off the automata, while the commander's team moved ahead. When a cannonball was fired, Kato used his body to block it. Suddenly, a massive grinder machine appeared, threatening to crush everything. The commander told Kato to hold them off for 5 minutes, long enough for him to stop the machine. Kato fought alone and ultimately destroyed the machine. Just as it was about to crush him, it halted. The Shirogane dog appeared, leading Kato to where the commander had used his own body to stop the machine. There, the commander told him his life story. He and his wife had a beautiful romance, but due to their differing statuses, they were forcibly separated by their families. When he met her again, she had become the wife of an automaton. They tried to escape together, but his wife sacrificed herself to protect him. At his lowest point, Lucille appeared and gave him hope. Now, he believed it was time to reunite with his wife. He entrusted the mission to kill Francine to Kato before passing on. Kato promised him and moved forward, reuniting with Tor, who had become separated from Steve. Tor helped guide Kato further. They passed through a display area dedicated to Francine. At this moment, Tor opened up to Kato his so-called fiancée was a lie. The truth was that 90 years ago, the Midnight Circus came to his village and massacred many people. Tor himself was gravely wounded. He had a direct encounter with the puppet Francine and harbored deep hatred for her, but was powerless at the time. When the chance came, he vowed to avenge his family. The two then encountered 3 others and Dada reappeared, announcing that they had reached the final stage. All that remained was to defeat the 4 strongest automata, and then they would finally meet Francine. Kato was severely injured, so the other 4 told him to stay put while they handled the battle. Each of them summoned their puppets and charged forward together. But Kato couldn't bear to just stand by and do nothing. He began dragging himself toward Francine. Several automata tried to stop him, but the Shirogane would not allow it. They stayed behind to buy him time. However, Lina, due to her carelessness, was the first to be eliminated. An automaton blocked Kato's path, and with no strength left to fight, he collapsed. Meanwhile, Ashiba and Gyochi arrived at the Midnight Circus in a vehicle, passing through an area littered with corpses, the aftermath of a brutal battle between the Shirogane and the automata. Suddenly, several automata rose again and rushed toward the circus. On Mingxia's side, they were using a welding machine to ascend slowly. Gyochi and Ashiba then reunited with Lucille as planned. Back with Kato's group, the situation was dire. They were overwhelmed, automata swarming them like ants. Just when all seemed lost, Lucille arrived. She still remembered the name of the one who killed her daughter, and now she was going to make him pay, with interest. She summoned her puppet, and to everyone's shock, it was a perfect replica of Francine. With just a slight display of pressure, all the automata instantly dropped to their knees before Lucille, a legendary Shirogane. The puppet was none other than Angelina, Lucille's daughter. Fatima checked on Kato and found that his heart had stopped. Steve said it was still possible to save him, So they rushed him into an emergency medical chamber and began resuscitation with electric shocks. Meanwhile, Lucille began taunting daughter. He tried to deny that the figure before him was Francine, to regain the ability to move, but he couldn't bring himself to deny her. Lucille kept pushing. If the one before you isn't Francine, then why are you kneeling? She called it the bondage of prejudice. She continued to mock Francine. Mingxia tried to stop Lucille, fearing daughter might regain control and kill her. But Lucille went on. She revealed that she knew the automata had been searching for the Philosopher's Stone, so she had retrieved the stone from the bottom of a well and placed it inside her daughter's body, turning Angelina into bait for the automata. Her only regret was not fulfilling her role as a mother. She pushed daughter until he could no longer suppress himself. He lunged at her, and in doing so, opened the gates of hell for himself. Automata could not exist without purpose. Francine was their reason for existing, and by denying her, he had sealed his fate. Mingxia rushed to Lucille's side. Lucille, having lived a full life, had no regrets. Before she passed, she told Mingxia, "Everyone's life is a blank canvas. So paint yours with colorful pens and make something beautiful, don't fill it with only black like I did." With that, Lucille disintegrated. In a dream-like vision, Kato had a final conversation with Lucille. Then it was time for her to go. Outside, Kato began to show signs of petrification. Steve, who was also starting to turn to stone, continued the surgery. Despite everything, he pushed through and completed the final stitch before succumbing himself. Jiochi and the remaining Shirogane used this chance to strike the 3 motionless automata. However, the lower-tier automata were still active. Only the 4 ancient automata created by Francine had unwavering loyalty, mass-produced ones did not. The Shirogane fought with all they had against the automata onslaught. Knowing he wouldn't survive much longer, Tor decided to take down as many automata as possible and self-destructed in their midst. Inspired by Tor's sacrifice, the black Shirogane pressed forward. One automaton began to move and blocked his path. He grabbed the heating automaton, enduring its heat, while Jiochi took the chance to lunge at Francine. She still managed to block his attack. Meanwhile, the black Shirogane, pierced through by the automaton, refused to give up. He had his puppet snake bite him and suck his blood, Shirogane blood, deadly to automata. Then he commanded the snake to bite the automaton, and both died together. Ashiba, hiding nearby, was left speechless at the scene. Though wounded, Jiochi crawled forward, determined to finish off the remaining 2 automata. Inside the medical chamber, Steve was now almost fully petrified but continued operating. After completing the final stitch, Steve, too, passed away. Just as Jiochi was about to strike, the automata managed to destroy Angelina and kill him. Ashiba tried to block their path but couldn't stop them, so he had to step aside and let the 2 automata through. Inside, Kato was still unconscious. Fatima decided to go out and hold off the enemies for as long as she could. She fought, but it was insignificant. The enemies were simply too powerful. Just when she was about to become the second Jew to be out of the game, Kato burst out. He had returned with Steve's legs, the black Shirogane's arms, Tor's speed, and the collective will of everyone. Kato landed a punch straight to Panta's face and rescued Fatima. Panta charged at him, but at this point, they were just punching bags for Kato. Nothing could withstand even a single blow from him. One enemy remained, attempting to burn Kato alive, but unfortunately for him, Kato wasn't a Jew. 1 punch was all it took to reduce him to ash. Fatima, satisfied, passed on. Now, all that remained was to kill Francine. Just as Kato was about to finish everything, the puppet spoke. She had been created by Francine herself. Kato was shocked. On the day of her creation, she was assigned the role of replacing Francine as commander of the automata. Francine had grown weary of running the midnight circus and had passed everything onto the puppet before vanishing. Kato asked if there was any way to cure the syndrome, but unfortunately, only the real Francine knew, and the puppet had no idea where she was. Kato went mad at the truth. All their sacrifices and efforts now seemed meaningless. He destroyed the puppet. Days later, Shiro was searching for her missing master. Guy told her not to shelter the boy too much and to let Seiga grow in his own way. Guy then returned to the circus first. There, Shiro sensed Kato's presence. She found him, but he had gone mad, attacking her repeatedly, convinced that she was Francine. She tried to remind him of their memories, but he refused to listen. He kept attacking, demanding the cure from her. He recounted everything he had been through. After the battle, he had returned to an elderly Shirogane named Fu, the chairman of an industrial corporation. Fu had been observing Kato's entire story. He never fought directly, only supported the Shirogane from behind the scenes. Unlike Lucille, Fu's ideal was not to fight, but to do business and learn. Since Shirogane aged 5 times slower than normal humans, he had enough time to research and build his fortune. Fu then revealed that Shiro was the Francine Kato had been looking for. That's why Kato came for her. However, Shiro truly didn't know anything. As Kato interrogated her, he was overwhelmed with emotion. Shiro recalled the time they had spent together, and how much she had learned from him. She told him that if killing her would bring him peace, then so be it. Just as he was about to strike, memories of Shiro surged back, driving him into madness and making him flee. The next day, Seiga began searching for the truth of his own identity, starting at the place where he used to live with his mother. He remembered the day his mother died, and he was taken to meet his father, whose face he couldn't even recall. Living with his father, he was always treated as an illegitimate child and cried alone. Then his grandfather appeared, always gentle, always helping and teaching him many things, including knowledge about puppets and the Shirogane. Just as his grandfather had warned, after his father's death and people discovered he was the heir, many assassination attempts occurred. Seiga returned to where it all began, Karazawa. While reflecting on what Kato had taught him, he met the gardener of the estate. It turned out that Seiga's grandfather had paid this man to work there for life, no matter what happened. When he learned Seiga was the heir, he panicked and took him home, bringing out a box left by Seiga's father. Inside was a bundle of keys and a letter. The message was simple. His father told him to return to the mansion and find the room with the lock-shaped wardrobe. Seiga ran off, while the gardener secretly made a call. Seiga arrived at the now ruined mansion and found the room. Inside was a generator with a recorded message from his father, though it quickly became clear that he wasn't a good person. And the reason his father had taken care of him and left all his inheritance to him was to prepare for a long-term plan, to seize Seiga's body by extracting his brain. He had already prepared the necessary equipment and incredibly powerful puppets that surpassed any others at the time. Seiga, terrified, ran away, but waiting for him outside were 2 members of the Kuraga clan. They had been given a mission by Seiga's grandfather. If his father successfully took over Seiga's body, they were to kill him. Seiga tried to explain, but they believed he was faking it. They summoned their puppets and attacked him. Seiga ran back into the basement and tried to use the puppets his father had prepared, but he couldn't open the suitcase. Just then, a voice guided him on how to open it. The first puppet he retrieved was one weighing 1,000 tons. With his natural talent and the guidance of the mysterious voice, he easily defeated the first puppet. The assassin quickly retreated. The mysterious voice then revealed itself, a raptor-like automaton named Griffon. It had been created to assist Seiga's father in case he had trouble recovering his memories. The assassin returned to the surface and confirmed that Seiga was indeed his father reborn. They sent another puppet down to fight. Seiga took out the second puppet, a pirate. With just a few swings, Seiga defeated the second automaton. The 2 assassins tried to retreat again, but Seiga had something he needed to ask them about his grandfather. Griffon told him to open the third suitcase. This time, it contained a flying sorcerer. Seiga mounted the puppet and took off in pursuit. Meanwhile, at the Kuraga family estate, the clan elders gathered in front of Seiga's grandfather, who was on the verge of death. Upon hearing the news that Seiga's body had been taken over, he was deeply saddened. He requested that they bring his son to him. He had something he needed to ask. The 2 assassins received the message and, realizing Seiga's flight speed was too slow, decided to just bring him back themselves to save time. When Seiga woke up, he had been taken to meet his grandfather. Seiga was overjoyed. He thought his grandfather had died, but here he was alive before him. However, his grandfather did not acknowledge him. Even when Seiga insisted that he had not been brainwashed, his grandfather asked if he had found the soft stone yet. Before killing the person he mistakenly believed was his son, he forced Seiga to witness all the harm his father had caused. Seiga was then made to drink his grandfather's blood to experience his memories firsthand. Seiga then found himself reliving his grandfather's youth. Back then, Shoji was both a swordsman and a physician. The man who had taught him in childhood was none other than Shirogane, the same Shirogane from before. Shoji had admired his talent and followed him. Shirogane taught Shoji new knowledge, and Shoji aided him in creating Arlequin. In Japanese, Shirogane is written as Bai Yin. As he grew older, Shoji continued working as a doctor. One day, he was summoned to the red light district to treat a nobleman. After the examination, he handed over a prescription to the servant. Suddenly, a courtesan entered the room. Her name was Tono. She pointed out that 2 ingredients in the prescription were unnecessary and accused Shoji of using them as an excuse to obtain them for free. Then she left to entertain her guest. The noble apologized to Shoji for Tono's rudeness. Shoji didn't mind and asked who she was. The noble said she was a foreign courtesan whose real name was Angelina. A year ago, while walking down the street, he had suffered a heart attack and nearly died until Angelina appeared and saved him. She had voluntarily become a courtesan. Angelina, too, remembered that day well, the day her mother, Lucille, cast her out. Lucille had given her a vial of aqua vitae, saying, "If you ever love someone, give this to them. They will live beside you forever." Shirogane had been fated to fight automata for life, and Lucille didn't want her daughter to end up the same way. She wanted Angelina to find her own purpose. But even after a year, Angelina still hadn't found it. Although Shoji said he didn't mind being accused, he was clearly frustrated. He accidentally walked into Angelina's room. Shoji tried to leave, but Angelina stopped him and asked him to drink a few glasses with her. She had lost all interest in anyone by then. She had traveled far and wide, and no one had ever brought her anything truly exciting in her immortal life. But Shoji realized that her smile was completely fake, like that of a puppet. His words struck a nerve. Angelina, hit where it hurt, asked what Shoji would do if he had an immortal body. His answer was simple: he would be able to love her eternally. Angelina was deeply surprised by his reply. Just then, someone rushed in and shouted that there was a fire. A samurai was attempting to set the place ablaze and commit suicide along with a courtesan. In the chaos, Shoji searched for the girl being threatened by the samurai. He tried to save her, but bare hands stood no chance against a katana. There was no hope. Suddenly, Angelina appeared and struck the samurai with Arlequin. Shoji was stunned. That was Shirogane's puppet. Angelina remembered Shoji as well, since she had inherited the memories of her predecessor, Shirogane. They could talk later. First, they needed to escape. For some reason, Angelina couldn't understand it herself, but she really wanted to see this man smile. Their path was blocked by flames. Shoji still tried to find a way out. In that moment, Angelina finally realized this was the man her mother had told her about. After her long journey, she had finally found him. She then said she would clear a path for Shoji. She was immortal. She wouldn't die. Even if Shoji came to hate her because of this immortal body, that was fine. What mattered was that he lived. The two of them escaped successfully. Angelina fled afterward, hiding in a cave, shivering from the cold. She thought no one would ever drink aqua vitae for her. At that moment, Shoji arrived, gently covering her with a blanket. Angelina was moved. She had fallen for this man. When Shoji said he would listen to everything she had to say, she told him everything. She was scared that he might hate her, but Shoji drank the entire vial of aqua vitae. He had fallen in love with her at first sight. Now, she was no longer alone. The two embraced each other in happiness. For various reasons, the anime ends here. If you want to see more, try searching for it online. As for me, I haven't been able to find anything else to write for you. Goodbye.